Codex CLI might be the most powerful code editing tool that you didn't know you already had. But Claude Code has slash commands, agents, and planning. So which one is actually better? Claude Code is the 500-pound gorilla that everyone has been talking about, including me. But can Codex CLI be just as good? By the end, you'll know which one fits your budget and your workflow, but more important, really, can Codex CLI be formed to look a little bit more like Claude Code? That's the actual question we dive into. Let's get into it. All right, so if you've watched this channel at all recently, and in fact, many of the channels around here, you've noticed Claude Code. Claude Code is a CLI application. Basically, you launch it in the terminal, and that's where you do your editing. It has a little bit more of a UI than just your normal type in a command terminal experience. And I'm going to assume that you've seen a little bit of this in many other videos. If not, I have many of them that will describe this. Go check one of those out. Codex CLI is OpenAI's version of Claude Code, which is Anthropic, the Claude models. So if you come to their GitHub environment, you'll see an easy way to install it. If you're on a Mac, you can use brew install, and you can use npm to install it as well. This is extremely similar to Claude Code, same kind of thing. What I do want to point out here, and this one is critical and something that we'll be talking about in just a minute, is you can use Codex CLI with your ChatGPT plan. So basically, if you subscribe to ChatGPT, 20 bucks a month kind of subscribe, you have the use of GPT-5 as your coding engine included, period. They don't have definition of other thresholds and limits and everything else. Admittedly, it's a little scary that they don't have these listed out and there's no easy way to see. At least I haven't seen it. I've looked around. Let me know in the comments if you have a way to find out what the limits are. But as of the time of this, I couldn't find a way to determine where I was in any threshold. But there's a big plus to that. It sounds like what they're trying to say is we're going to compete with Anthropic. Feel free, have as much use as you want. And that's why I'm saying this thing might be the best coding tool that's just sitting back there waiting for you to use with a fantastic coding model. GPT-5 is a really fantastic model, and really this system here, the Codex CLI system, really gives you all of the opportunity to use it. But the devil is in the detail of using it. So that's what we're really going to look into, is how is it to live with? Claude Code has done a lot to make it very comfortable to use. Let's just say Codex CLI is lacking in some of those departments, but can we make it close? So if you don't want to get an Anthropic kind of account, you don't want to subscribe there, you might be okay with using what we've got here. Let's go take a look at what we might have to do. Okay, let's just get started. I'm going to kick these off in a rather special way. So basically what I'm getting into is my advanced version of both of these. This will be in high thinking mode for GPT-5. That's what we're seeing over here. And this one will end up in Opus mode, essentially the high mode for the Claude Code environment. I'm going to ask both of them to tell me about the project. First thing you'll see is you're going to see all of the thinking and everything else that happens with Codex in the clear. And it gets quite noisy trying to understand what it's doing. You can see all of this thinking is it not reporting to us. It's not yet talking to us. This would be collapsed, but you will make mistakes at some point and think what it's saying is stuff that it's about to do. Whereas it hasn't actually made up its mind in many cases. If you follow the thread down 2 or 3 paragraphs, you'll realize it says, oh, I don't need to do that. I'll do this instead. I have actually interrupted the model multiple times because I thought it was going the wrong direction, but I didn't realize I was in a thinking block and not in a kind of a message block. And you'll see the message block in a second when it comes back. And so here is what Claude Code gives us. It collapses all of its information inside of these blocks here, creates bullets to kind of give you placeholders of where it is doing work. And then it also handles markdown very elegantly, which Codex CLI amazingly still does not handle markdown. As you can see, these bold comments, things like that, it's not doing anything for us. So it makes it a lot harder to read. And I can't overstate this enough. This harder to read concept really ends up being a cognitive cost that you need to be sure you're okay paying. Yes, you might be able to use this for free. And let me TLDR this right now. If you don't have an Anthropic account and you're not using Claude Code, but wondering about it, and you are a subscriber to ChatGPT, go try Codex CLI. Hopefully this video will give you a couple quick steps on how to step into it and see what it can do. It is actually very excellent if you don't have something else. If you don't have Claude Code, then it's excellent. What you're seeing now is this report coming back, and it's very difficult to read through because it's markdown instead of being kind of cleaned up markdown or managed markdown that's being rendered. All right, so that's number one. Readability. Readability is very, very different between the two. As you can see, it gets very, very wordy. Okay, the next thing is slash commands. If you've used Claude Code, you know that if you hit slash, you'll see a series of slash commands, and I'm using the arrow keys to go up and down on them now to move around in all of the different actions that you can take. A lot of these are the default actions that come with the product itself, but there's also some that I have made myself, like project settings. I'm going to take that one now. You'll probably see this change colors in the background once it's written, but slash commands also exist over here. So the slash commands that we see with Codex CLI are much fewer. In fact, that's all of them. So you cannot add your own slash commands. This is not a thing that's offered yet for Codex CLI. So you can get by with the slash commands that come with these systems. They have the same basic concepts behind them. But if you ever extend slash commands or start to imagine that you might want to be able to run your own commands, I'll show you how to do that in a moment, but it is not nearly as simple as a slash command. So they've done something very nice in the Claude Code world by just allowing you to create your own local slash commands in a project that can be checked in with that project so everybody gets it, or they can be local to you. It can be in your home directory so that all Claude instances get it. They have done a lot of work to make this very, very useful to a developer. And it's those kinds of tools. That tooling is really the distinction largely between these two systems. Okay, a very common slash command that we do that both of them have is init. And so I'll do the beginning of init on both of these and show you that really this memory file that maybe you've seen in Claude Code that you're used to is called claudemd, and it'll save it in the project directory. It's called agentsmd over here. While they're going through this init, I can actually type a command. If I send this command while it's working, it will buffer this command. I have no such thing over on the other side. So as it's working through and you realize, oh, you know what I'm going to need it to do next, which often happens, or you know what else I need it to think of before it tells me it's done. This very frequently happens. Oh boy. You cannot do that with Codex CLI at this point. You have to wait until it's complete or interrupt it, tell it that message, and also tell it to continue what it was previously doing. It will do that, so you can once again get roughly to the same experience. But again, I'm going to say that magic word, ergonomics, it just doesn't feel the same. It feels like you're creating your own personal patch to solve the problem. Okay, so very briefly, let's take a look at what these did. If we look in the Codex world, it created this agents file. And if we look in the Claude side, it created a Claude file. And there's similar files, of course. They're markdown files that have a bunch of information that is there to help the system understand how the thing works. I won't go into the performance of these. In Claude Code, we have a very neat way of being able to add memories. Always run lint. So I am memorizing, or really adding to our memory, this always run lint. You can see it's telling us, do you want me to log this into the Claude file that we were just looking at? Or do you want a local version of that Claude file that's an addendum, essentially? Or do you want it to go all the way up to your home directory and save that in a Claude file? So what I'll do is I'll just put it in what we call project memory. And this project memory is actually the file that we were just looking at back here. And down here at the bottom, you'll see that our memorization has occurred. It's just added to this Claude file. There is no such concept over here in Codex. So there's no way to affect memory here that I've seen. Let's see if we can ask, because it might do it. Let's see. Oh, that's looking good. That's looking good. I'll update agentsmd with always run. Excellent. So maybe they just don't have a methodology for us to see that that's doable. All right, great. So this sounds like another potential parity. We do have a way to affect memory here. There we go. Address the warnings. Great. So this is saying always run the lint, like we said it, except they put it in their own language rather than what we said. So that's fine. They do have parity. I didn't see that, but that becomes part of that same challenge. Let's see if they have a hash mechanism. They don't. It's not obvious the way that you have to patch this stuff in. The fact that this one has a common mechanism of if you hit mash or hash and it tells you add it to memory, try typing these kinds of things in. That's just quite nice. All right, let's talk about models and kind of information. So if we do /status, we get some information on the status of both of these systems. They'll tell you where they're working and what system they're logged in with, what account you're using, these kinds of things. And in both of them, you'll see that there's a section for the model itself using ChatGPT or GPT-5, sorry, with reasoning effort high. Now, I'll show you in a moment how I turned this on. That is non-trivial. That's another topic that we have. But you can also see over here in the model, I'm using Claude Opus. So they're both allowed to use a higher stated model. And I will say, if you're just a GPT or a ChatGPT subscriber, $20, once again, you can get a high effort, high reasoning GPT-5, which is a very smart thinking model. You cannot do that with the $20 version of Anthropic. $20 does not get you Opus. $100 a month gets you Opus. In theory, you have all of the high GPT-5. Now, admittedly, it's not pro, but high GPT-5, we believe, kind of is on equal, at least, performance of Opus. It is an excellent model, and I would say if this is already sitting in your back pocket and you haven't tried it, give it a shot. But now that we have this info, what can we do? Over here in Claude, we could say, oh, I want to change my model. And if I go into the model picker, it will tell me, oh, you can do default, which it uses Opus for certain things. Otherwise, it uses Sonnet, or I can always be Opus, always be on Sonnet. So you can do these different plans. You can set things here within the tool. No such idea over here in Codex. So Codex CLI, managing this kind of thing is at the global level. You can't even do it in the local settings files of a project. You can't say, in this project, I want you to run at a certain intensity of thinking. That's set at the global level. All right, and so this brings us to a pretty complicated conversation. I'm not going to dive too deeply into. If y'all want to know more about configuring Codex CLI, reach out and maybe I can make a video about that. But I'd bet not enough people yet really want to hear about this. But basically, there's a way in Codex CLI to be able to configure the system when it launches. And this is in, I know I'm in Cursor, I apologize. I've opened up my home directory .codex folder. So this is the .codex folder, which is basically where Codex stores all of its high-level stuff from kind of a personal account standpoint. So this is my account's version of Codex. And in here, you'll see that I have things like my model reasoning effort is high, model reasoning summary would be concise, but it's not yet supported by GPT-5. I am running danger full access, which is the thing that gets me into essentially YOLO mode. I was telling you that I'm in a special mode here, so no approval. I don't need this thing asking me for approvals. And here's a tricky little way that I've set up a sound effect, because I like sound effects when these things finish. So this was my method, and I have a little function in here that it runs, which just plays a sound. I won't go into that either, but what you do see in here, which is very neat, this is how they're trying to manage this, not project level, but launch level. So you can launch this with different profiles, like a -P. If you do Codex -P, it will denote which profile you're looking for. And then this name is what you send, you space, and then high YOLO would set this into these values. So these values are not there by default if I type in Codex, but these are. And so when I go into a profile, it'll run this profile. You can have as many as you like. So I think there is something nice to say, oh, in any given environment, I can drop out and then kind of launch into high mode so that I can think pretty hard about this problem that I'm having. Or I can drop out and then come back in normal mode so that I don't have all the extra thinking for something that really medium thinking would certainly do just fine for. It is complex to get to this point. I understand that a very small sliver of people will ever get to the point of editing these files, but this is the way where you're really creating a system that works for you. If you want something that feels like Claude Code, you will be in this space. So understand that's part of the equation as well. However, you remember that I said you drop out and you change your profile to launch back into a different model, if you will. That's a problem. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so you remember how we were saying that you could just drop out of a session and then change your model in Codex and then restart your session. You could change your Codex-P to use a different profile. You noticed I didn't have any extra profiles in there. Well, I might have a low profile or something. I could kick off that different profile and then go ahead and launch Codex. So if you recall that, there is no way in Codex at all to resume a conversation. context is gone, completely gone. In Claude Code, there's a -c command. Now, that will continue the last conversation. So I'm going to go YCC. YC is the way that I launch mine into YOLO mode. Okay, and that gets us back up exactly to the last conversation loaded in here. You can also run resume, and when you select resume, there will be different conversations that you can select from to move around to specifically the conversation you'd like to get into. So there are a lot of ways in Claude Code to work through the history. If you remember inside of this .codex folder inside of my home directory, you can see all these sessions. These sessions are the sessions that we've been having with Codex, and it is writing the history for these things. And so since it is obviously writing the history, but we can't continue with one of them, I got interested and decided to write my own viewer to see if we could quickly take a look at the different files that are in that folder. And this is what the viewer would look like to look through that information. So it exists. Some reason Codex doesn't allow you to at least go get the very last one of these and pull it in as current context. So this is another really major oversight that if they left it out but are keeping history, something's wrong. It feels very strange that this would have been left out because it is a truly helpful thing to be able to step out of the model, especially if you can change your profile and then be able to go back in exactly where you were. I mean, all of us know that from ChatGPT, that you can go get an old chat and continue at any time later. That's invaluable in many cases. All right, let's cover two really big ones. They're too dense. I've done a little bit on each one of these in previous videos, so if you want to find out more about those, check that out. But at the same time, one of them is almost impossible to actually repeat, maybe truly impossible to actually repeat, and the other can be repeated, but with some pain. So let's do that one first. The first one is planning mode. So planning mode is something, if you shift tab here, you'll notice that as I shift tab, there's a indicator down at the bottom of which mode I'm in. I can get into planning mode. So now anything I ask of Claude Code, it will just tell me back. It doesn't actually write any files. It doesn't have write privileges. And in fact, if I tell it, hey, can you please write this to a file, it will actually come back and say, oh, that's pretty cool. You're asking me to write something to a file. I'd love to do that, but I don't have rights. You want to change the mode so that I can write it? So you can switch out of the mode and then ask it to write, and it'll write it just fine. And that leads us to how you might do that. There is no such thing in Codex. Now, admittedly, if you have Codex, then that means you have ChatGPT. You likely do anyway. All users have some version of ChatGPT. I would say go use ChatGPT for your planning if you need to. It just is an extra space. So it's kind of nice that it's inside of Claude Code. And if we're trying to see if we can daily drive the thing and make it relatively the same, how do you solve this problem? Well, one way you can solve this, and I've done this, is I'll describe this briefly, is ask for the thing to just give you a readout. Just give me a report back. Don't do any changes to the code. Say that up front, maybe say it again at the end. That's part of the complexity, is it could start kicking off and doing some coding, so be ready on your escape key to stop. And then once you get a plan that you like, going back and forth with it is a little more challenging because it will kick into build mode at some point. You can have it write it to a file. If you get it written to a file, that's the file you can have a conversation about, and it will then write to that file. So if then your conversation is kind of iterative, it'll be updating that file because it'll know what you're talking about rather than the whole project. I know that sounds strange, and eventually when you want to run that plan, you can just say, hey, can you read this file and let's execute it. I want to build what's inside of that file. That does work quite well, and it's nice to have the plan as kind of a file somewhere that you can touch later. So the same thing can kind of be done whether or not you want it in Claude Code. You can shift into plan mode, get the plan, shift out of plan mode and say, write this as a file. You don't have to. If you just say, go ahead and start executing on it, it has internal tools to kind of keep track of that as a to-do system, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one way to equate planning. You can also do that file trick for things like slash commands. Write the prompt that you would put in a slash command in a file, and then you can say inside of your project, hey, can you run that command that's in this file? And basically the same kind of things will happen. Maybe not perfectly the same, but roughly the same. The last one is agents. And there is just no analogy in the Codex world for agents. There's nothing we can do about it. Agents in Claude Code are really wonderful. They have, if used correctly, they're very valuable, but have a very focused usage. The concept of an agent is basically being able to run a special prompt, and that prompt goes through whatever execution it needs to do in its own little sandbox of memory. And what that really means is I can peel something off that says, go run lint and clean everything up and then check it all in an agent. And that agent has the same access to the project, just like this normal chat would. But everything it does and the very long context that might come from running and iterating on all the test cases and everything else will not pollute this context. So you might think of it as kind of decoupling an action that you can then put onto another context that you can pass information into and information can come back out of. There's a lot of really interesting uses. That's not a great use case for it, though it works. The real separation of the context is what it's about. That's one of its major features, is being able to separate that context. All right, so there are other things in Claude Code that I didn't get to, subtasks and things like that, that just, there's no good way to do. It's not worth even having a discussion about it. But if you're just generally trying to figure out how to use these two together, I think I've covered enough ground to kind of come to, drumroll please, a conclusion. Okay, I don't think I hit anything in all of that. I think you can probably guess my conclusion to some degree. If you have a subscription to ChatGPT, you already have Codex CLI, you already have access to GPT-5 at high. This is great. This is something that you can do, but you have to use the API to do it. You don't have high otherwise if you're just a $20 subscriber. So it's a really valuable exercise of just kind of diving into it, putting it into a folder. You don't have to write a program. You can just put a file in there and say, hey, let's edit this file, and watch GPT-5 work with you to edit a file. So there is some value to it. It's a little bit painful. If you're going to use it as your daily driving editing experience, I would say at this point, is it possible? Yes. And if you're trying to save 20 bucks, instead of spending 40 bucks, you only want to spend 20, then absolutely. There's a lot of these little mitigations that you can put in place you'll get used to. There's no way I'm giving up my Claude Code just yet for that, though. Honestly, my actual take on it, I wanted to be able to adopt Codex and say, yeah, it's essentially the same thing with some addendums to it. And it really is not even very close. And in fact, the very first thing I shared, and I shared it first because I thought a lot of people might not make it this far in, just the readability and the cognitive cost of using it is much, much higher, order of magnitude higher, easily. And that enough is the thing that I would not want to use this on a daily basis. If I have to be a little bit more efficient, maybe even 5 times more efficient, but still feel the pain of having to interact with this system, the pleasure of working with Claude Code, if you've used it, you know. So it's kind of a, if you know, you know. All right, I hope this helped at all. I didn't really get to every single item, of course. There's just too many things, and a lot of them just don't have analogs. Hopefully this was enough to say if you were just trying to use it from a daily standpoint, how does it feel? If you like this kind of stuff, please subscribe. It tremendously helps the channel, and I really do appreciate those of you who have recently subscribed. That's fantastic. It really does help once again. Thanks for coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.